You know, I was mulling over this morning how to kick off the talk, and I thought, it's always a good strategy to be a little self-deprecating. And I was going over in my mind, and every time I stand to speak before any group, I remember my most embarrassing moment in my 36-year government career. I was about 27 or 28 years old and had been invited to speak at a conference hosted by DEP, Department of Environmental Protection. Back then it was DER, in Tallahassee. And I was like a baby bureaucrat with no credentials and nothing really to say and didn't know much, but at that age and station in life, you think you know everything. So I attended the conference. Well, I didn't know at the time that my boss at St. John's, who asked me, and I was so honored, I didn't know that he'd gone through about 6 people who couldn't do it or told him no. So I was already the bottom of the barrel by the time I got asked to do it. And I got to the conference. Those were back in the days we did the slideshows, with the old carousel that always got stuck in the projector. You remember that? And it was a big deal to make those slides. I mean, there was a lot of advanced work to go into making a slide. And ultimately, you make the slide, the date on it was wrong, you wanted to change the image or the language, you had to go back out and make it again. It took days to do it, not seconds like you have with PowerPoint. So all you guys that have only worked with PowerPoint, I liken it to the mom who's only known disposable diapers. Not like mine who had to soak them in the pail. You guys are getting off easy. So I sit down to lunch. I'm the after lunch speaker. I sit down at lunch, and it's at this round tables, in the room, and everybody just finds a seat. And then there's this real distinguished-looking gentleman with white hair. Remember, I'm 27-ish, okay? And he asked if he could sit with me, and I certainly, no, the seat's not taken. And he made the mistake of asking me what I did. And I threw up all over him. I mean, I just took off about how important my job was and how important my work was and how important my job, everything about me. And I carried on, I'm sure, for an embarrassingly long time. It must have been 5 minutes. To him, it probably seemed an eternity. And he patiently listened and made the mistake of nodding in agreement, which only egged me on. And after I finally spun dry and shut up, I thought, well, it'd be polite to ask him what he did. So I did. And he leaned over to me and he got right on the edge of my personal space, Not right in it, but just on the edge. And he gave me this wry smile and he said, "Son." And it was the tone of the word son. It was that tone that your mother uses just before she tells you how stupid whatever it is you just did was. And he said, "Son, I was the governor of Florida when you were born." And I looked on his tag, and sure enough, it said Leroy Collins. And if there had been a hole under that table, I'd have got in it and stayed in it. And what added insult to injury, I not only had to sit by him and eat my lunch in silence, because I didn't dare open my mouth after that, but when I got up to talk and show my slideshow that got stuck in the carousel, as it tried, guess who was sitting right in front of me in the room that I had to face? And it was really not that good of a presentation, but I want you to know he was gracious enough and had the class to come up and seek me out at the break and tell me what a good job I did. So I learned a big lesson that day. So I just want to ask, are there any former governors in the room today? Your former speakers this morning have spoken at the micro level, detailing some important restoration techniques and strategies and some specific examples of projects that lead to the improvement and betterment of our wetlands. I'd like to take a different tact and lift us up about 40,000 feet and talk to you about an imperiled treasure on the east central coast of Florida called the Indian River Lagoon. And to do that, rather than use a litany of, the 50 slides that are available, and look at, if anybody can get on the internet, you can swipe all the pretty pictures you want. They're not hard to find, and we've all got them, and every agency with an acronym can glitz and glamour you with a lot of pretty slides, and I could do the same. And that's fine. That's a wonderful technique, and I think images with words are good. But I want to start and kick off this presentation this morning by doing something just a little different, and that is I'd like to weave with words instead of pictures so much, and tell the story of the Indian River Lagoon by beginning where the story starts. Running through the coast of East Central Florida is a ribbon of water that wanders through the backyard of growing urban areas along Florida's Atlantic coast. It meanders through the heart of North Florida's most diverse estuary. Along its way, that water body passes by pre-colonial Indian mounds, ancient salt marshes, and the more modern world of America's spaceport at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. This underwater rainforest, known as the Indian River Lagoon, your lagoon, my lagoon, is home to a rich array of both plants and animals, boasting over 4,000 different species, including manatees, dolphin, sea turtles, and seahorses. And also the unseen litany of microinvertebrates that form the very perigee of the food chain. A number of seagrass beds, slammed hard by the super bloom and the fallout of 3 years ago that decimated the seagrasses in the northern end of the lagoon, which are remarkably recovering fairly well considering the hit that they took a few years ago, are hiding places for the young sea creatures such as oysters, clams, shrimp, crabs, and fish whose very survival depend on the willingness, collectively and individually, of people to protect and restore this lagoon, which is a very special and a very fragile place. This fragile foundation was created thousands of years ago when the Atlantic Ocean deposited a massive sandbar along Florida's east coast, cutting off a long, narrow stripe of the ocean that became the lagoon. Running about 156 miles from north to south from the Ponce Inlet at New Smyrna Beach south to Jupiter near Stewart in Martin County, the lagoon's location gives it a climate that ranges from temperate to subtropical. For us Floridians, we would know that as from hot to really hot. Only 5 inlets connect the Indian River and its ancient parent, the Atlantic Ocean. Sheltered by sandy beaches, the lagoon evolved into an important nursery for wildlife that thrive in this warm, shallow waters. Along the shores and in the marshlands adjacent to this system, forgive me, the light is a little dim here, but I've got a solution. I'm going to tilt the screen so I can use the light of the screen to see my notes. Thank you. So along these shores and the marshlands, bushy mangroves hold the soil in place. And many of the roots that protrude through the water form a thicket where small fish and crabs seek shelter from larger predators. These evergreen mangroves are forests that act as nutrient factories, absorbing energy from the sun, converting it into food. Crustaceans, shellfish, and juvenile fish graze on the lush fields of growth found on the leaves that drop from the mangroves to the bottom of the Indian River Lagoon. In the nearby shallows, meadows of grasses provide food for the manatee, for the turtle, and shelter for crabs, shrimp, and fish. And like the trout and redfish do below the water's surface, the osprey and the eagle perform the same patrol above the waters in daily search of their food. All are tied together in an intricate web we know as the food chain. Now, this delicate balance, this ballet between nature, both subaqueous and on the surface of the earth, between the natural system that is the lagoon and the people and creatures who use and depend on this water system, are seriously threatened. The effects of modern civilization are polluting the water and destroying the lagoon's vitality. Many biologists and scientists will tell you that Florida was by design intended to support about 3 million people. But now we boast a population the size of Australia, right here on this peninsula. Pressure from residential, commercial, industry, agriculture, and just plain old human ignorance and negligence have harmed this once pristine waterway. But the good news is, it's not too late. The good news is that we can work together to save this unique natural treasure if we choose to work together. Let's see. The lagoon needs our help. Between Volusia and Martin counties, alternately known as the Space Coast and the Treasure Coast, it might have been known as Nature's Coast, because it is the natural environment of the lagoon that attracts so many people to it. 3 major water bodies, the Mosquito Lagoon and Banana Rivers near the KSC, Kennedy Space Center, and Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge, and the main stem of what we know as the Indian River Lagoon, converge to form this unique waterway. A popular recreation area for boaters, for fishers, for hunters, and a habitat for abundant wildlife. And although the word river appears in the name, the Indian River is not a river at all. It is actually a tidal estuary. An estuary is a water body where fresh water, in this case draining from the land or a river, and salt water from the ocean meet and mix. Estuaries are, in short, places where rivers meet the sea. But the Indian River is even more special than a typical estuary or a typical embayment. It is a special type of estuary called a lagoon because it has limited water exchange with the ocean and does not rely on rivers as its primary source of fresh water supply. And around this unique, fragile ecosystem live, work, and play some 2.5 million people who in this lagoon region make up, even in these recessionary times, one of the fastest growing areas in the United States. In an effort to protect the Indian River, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, by congressional designation, sponsors a program called the National Estuary Program. And in 1991, the Indian River Lagoon was enrolled as an estuary of national significance. The water management districts from both St. John's and South Florida were asked to sponsor this program on behalf of the state, to act as the local sponsor for this newly established National Estuary Program, which was established and created under the Water Quality Act of 1987. That program identifies nationally significant estuaries that are threatened by pollution, development, or overuse. And it assists those local organizers in the development of long-range plans, I underscore long-range plans, to protect and manage those waterways. The IRL program began in April 1991 with oversight from EPA. Other program participants, although not sponsors, but participants in the program, as I mentioned, include DEP, the 2 water management districts, St. John's and South Florida, the 5 counties that straddle the lagoon, Volusia, Brevard, Indian River, St. Lucie, and Martin counties, and a host of citizen stakeholders and other government entities, including NASA, the Corps of Engineers, and virtually the FWC and many other resource management agencies. And with input from a Lagoon Advisory Board made up of individuals and representatives from federal, state, and local governments and agencies, this program has functioned and developed a reasonably good reputation for the last 24 years. The program goals include the following. Well, let me just speak quickly before that to this slide. 2 points. We are one of 28 NEPs, I'm sorry, acronyms galore, National Estuary Programs, one of 28. Florida enjoys 4. We have the Indian River on the East Coast and 3 NEP programs on the west coast of Florida, Tampa Bay, Sarasota Bay, and Charlotte Harbor. The goal of the NEP is largely non-regulatory. It doesn't use a permitting hammer to achieve its goals. It works through collaboration, cooperation, facilitation with a host of interested parties and agencies responsible for the management and care of the waterway. The goals of the program are to improve and protect the environmental integrity of the lagoon, to attain and maintain a healthy ecosystem that supports species, fish and wildlife, to provide a real forum for the coordination of efforts among and between agencies, develop partnerships and work plans that will lead directly to the improvement of the lagoon's condition. Importantly, number 4, to deliver a strategy to maximize the participation of the public and to help educate the public about issues attendant to the lagoon. It's interesting that education is a requirement of all NEP programs. If you sign on to the program to be an NEP, you must include an education function to help inform and educate people about not only the condition of the waterway, its problems, but what can be done to solve them and what they as individuals can do to participate in that process. To develop and implement formal management plans with clearly established accountability and goals. That's achieved through a fairly thick document called a Comprehensive Management Plan, a CCMP, that identifies all the issues, all the problems, and all the intended solutions. And then lastly, let's not forget this one, the importance to develop a long-term funding stream and all the sources possible to support the restoration and protection programs. And this is a big one, guys, because, you know, I would characterize the effort over the last quarter century as this. We've pretty much picked the low-hanging fruit. We've worked with partners such as Merritt Island and a host. We've reconnected thousands and thousands of acres of mosquito impoundments, not only on the Merritt Island Refuge, but up and down the lagoon, wherever they were. We have done shoreline protections. We've put in baffle boxes, so many baffle boxes that capture nutrients that run off the city streets where there was no stormwater treatment, cities that predate rules and permitting requirements, such as Old Titusville, Old Cocoa, Old Melbourne. We have trapped sediments. We've done what we can with what we had, but the real heavy lifting lies ahead, and that is how to deal with those years and years of muck deposits that are in the lagoon. How do we deal with that? How do we pay for that? What do we do with it? Those are the type of questions. issues related to the hydrodynamics of the system, the effects of causeways. As you know, every bridge is not absent earthen sections that block part of the circulation of the lagoon. We're finding through our hydrodynamic modeling that has caused a tremendous effect on how water moves throughout this fragile system. So those are all questions for the future. The diagnosis of the ills of this system are certainly endemic to all of Florida. There's nothing on this screen that would surprise any of you in this room. And that is that we have water quality and sediment degradation, habitat loss, and in this case, a lack of a long-term commitment to solving a very serious and expensive problem. Quickly, let me just try to offer a prescription from our perspective going forward of what we need to do to solve these issues. First, in the arena of water and sediment quality, we need to restore the natural freshwater discharges into the Indian River. And you'll hear from the next speaker, my colleague Hector Herrera, about efforts St. John's has made to curtail discharges from major canals and flood control structures that have created an artificial imbalance in the amount of fresh water and the timing of that fresh water that hits the lagoon. Of course, everyone knows of the impacts of discharges from Okeechobee to the south at the St. Lucie waterway, and how those can be managed and must be managed to reduce the impacts on the Indian River. We need to reduce soil erosion. One of the most harmful effects on the lagoon is the deposition of fine sediment into the lagoon from streets, from runoff from lawns, wherever there's the lagoon smashing against unprotected shoreline. Because the lagoon is so shallow, it's almost like a cookie sheet. If you can imagine a cookie sheet, other than the dredged intercoastal waterway, it virtually has no depth. And so every time there's any kind of stiff wind, the lagoon looks like an ocean out there. And that just churns the bottom and smashes those waves into the banks that create more erosion of the banks and more loading of sediment into the lagoon. We need to reduce the amount of nutrients, and that comes from a variety of sources, from major inputs down to the impact of over-fertilization of Florida's green backyards, and reduce the disposal of pollutants not only in the lagoon itself, but also into the tributaries that feed the waterway. On the second front, the habitat loss. Of course, we've made tremendous strides over the last quarter century in reconnecting a number of mosquito impoundments. I forget the number, but it's impressive, really, how many of these former dike systems have been reconnected through a very straightforward, simple method of pipes through levees and degrading of levees. We need to restore and expand the seagrass beds. As you know, those were hit hard, as I mentioned, in the super bloom and the fallout of the super bloom. We are seeing signs of some recovery there that's promising. But the seagrasses are the bellwether indicator species. That's the canary in the mine shaft. You know the analogy. When the miners, in the old days, carried the canary in the cage into the mines, and the canary stopped breathing, you got out because the oxygen was gone. Those seagrasses are that indicator species. They're the canary that tell us the health and vitality of the system. When seagrasses are doing well, most of the trend indicators follow suit. When the seagrasses collapse, things are in trouble. So reconnecting more mangroves and salt marshes to the lagoon, improving as much of the habitat, restoring as much of the habitat has been lost is a key concern. And finally, on the coordination front, we need it all. As the FWC director, Nick Wally, said at the social last night, it's all about building partnerships between government and citizen stakeholders it isn't us, them. I mean, wasn't it Lincoln that said, of the people, for the people, by the people? And so, you know, it's government, your government, working in concert with citizens who care, and entities with not only responsibility but have missions that can affect the changes that we need to see happen. We need partnerships that include business, scientists, government, stakeholders, and so forth. And we need long-term funding commitments to implement those plans and to monitor the efficacy of those cleanup efforts. To that end, I'd close my remarks this morning by offering an update this morning on the Lagoon National Estuary Program, and in a byline, what's underway today to make this program bigger, better, and stronger. In March, I was asked to serve as interim director, sort of in the twilight of my Water District career. It was an unexpected request from my director, Hans Tanzler in Palatka, to head up the NEP as a transitional leader, to bring leadership and direction in support of what we're calling a major transition. St. John's has acted with the blessing of our South Florida partner as pretty much the sole administrative sponsor for this program, and the program has been led out of our Palm Bay Service Center for its history, 24 years. But we're working now to expand the NEP partnership base. We've done the best we can with what we had to work with, and we're not ashamed to stand here and say we've made mistakes, and we would do things differently if we had it all to do over again. But we also feel that the timing is right to expand the tent, to make the tent larger and include more players, more partners, and more local input. In fact, so much so that working with the DEP and the South Florida districts, we have offered the 5 counties and some cities along the lagoon to join the board and to have ultimately the final say in making direct decisions affecting the local interests up and down this waterway. The plan is for DEP and the 2 districts to remain a partner and a sponsor, but also hopefully to include the 5 counties. We hope all 5 of the counties will join the fray and become policy board members. And also we've invited 3 cities. We can't have every city up and down the lagoon because we have about 200 governments up and down the Indian River. It's such a long lagoon. But we've offered the leagues of cities in Volusia, Space Coast, and Treasure Coast to join the fray and join the lagoon board. Our next steps are to continue the efforts to solicit partners, secure funding, and finalize an interlocal agreement that will create a new sponsoring entity for the National Estuary Program. We will have a firm proposal to the St. John's Board, and one will follow to the South Florida Governing Board to provide some initial bridge funding for a transition leading to the end of our long tenure as the sole sponsor for the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. And at that point, however long that takes, and I'm sure the sausage making process will be uglier than we hope, and it will take longer than we pray, but at the end of the day, our goal is to hand the reins to a new steering group legally authorized to act as the local sponsoring entity for EPA's NEP for the Indian River Lagoon. So that's what's in the works. That's the plan forward as we sit today, and leading that charge is somewhat like herding cats or squirrels, more like cats. But it's fun, it's invigorating, and there's no day that is not without a challenge. For more information, I welcome you to contact me. Timekeeper, do we have time for a question? We're good. I'd be happy to address a question or two if you have it. Yes, sir.
Maurice, is there any scientific data showing the increase in the quality of the water in the Indian River Lagoon as a direct result from the reconnection of the impoundment?
Well,
Could you repeat the question?
oh, certainly.
Repeat the question, so everyone.
Certainly, thank you. The question is, there are data, empirical data that show any improvement in quality or what the quality of water is pre and post mosquito impoundments? Yes, there is. I will tell you, however, our monitoring network, when we moved to begin connecting impoundments, was limited. We have more data now, of course, than we did 20 years ago, obviously, and we have a broader network of stations. In fact, we just put in some pretty sophisticated stations that we partnered with DEP on that are real-time collectors, and they're up and down the lagoon, and we're excited to have that. I'm sure we do. I'm sure we do. As you know, the water districts are the data people. You know, we're the scientific group that's charged by the SWIM Act, not NEP, but the SWIM Act, to manage and steward this resource. So we have data. We have data. How it ties directly to the impoundments, I'm not qualified to speak to. I cut my career on the other side of the levee in the headwaters of the St. John's, so this is a new appointment for me, but I'm sure our scientists do have that, and any data we have would be available to you or any member of the public.
And where might I find that data, or who should I speak to?
This is the guy. Just get in touch with me, and I'll route it to this right scientist. If you want to talk to the chief scientist for the Lagoon program, he's happy to do that, and he's a really qualified guy. He did a lot of his studies in Australia, in the estuaries of Australia for many years, and real knowledgeable, super guy. Chuck Jacoby is his name.
What's the last name?
Jacoby.
Okay.
Chuck Jacoby at St. John's.
Thank you.
Sure. Other question? Anybody want to be a partner with us? I'll pass the hat today. It's okay? All right. All right, well, thank you so much for having me and having others, members of our staff, to brief you today. And it's been a pleasure to be here. And just remember, the next time you stand up to speak, make sure there aren't any former governors in the room. Have a good day.